the third edition of our weekly lecture series, where Professor Sudha will be delivering the lecture on the topic, the world before and after Gaza. Personally, this is a very important topic on which I would want certain closure, certain understanding on many issues of ethics, human rights, and also the very foundation and the basis of international law when we're facing such a polarized issue before us. It's unfolding right after the operation of international law, which has been set up as a consequence of the world wars. So we're waiting for your lecture. We would want to get some understanding, some theoretical understanding to how to approach this issue. With that, I welcome Professor Sudha.
They spoke about one thing specifically in the brief address that gave. We spoke about closure, finality. Finding a closure or finality is not enough. That closure should be on the basis of justice. And when I address you, I feel very nervous actually. I feel very nervous. Not that I make a fool of myself before you, because there are umpteen number of times that I make a fool of myself on this campus. That's not my concern. The reason I am a bit nervous is that I might do some injustice to the topic. That's it. That's it. Now coming to what are we going to discuss today? What is it about the whole thing? And am I being very innovative in coming up with this particular topic? No. The topic that I have chosen is the world before and after Gaza. And there is a book written by Pankaj Mishra, The World Before After Gaza. I just added before, that's all. Because I just wanted to trace the history of the 100 years of war which is happening in between Palestine and Israel. It's not only 100 years, it is now 118 years. 108 years of war between Palestine and Israel. Why is it, what is happening? Did everything start on October 7th? Because your generation, the young students' generation, you can only relate with what is happening in your immediate lives. I thought that maybe we should look into trace the history of this whole problem. And when we do it, maybe we can find something, some kind of a, not a solution, but work towards, or walk towards, work towards that kind of a solution. Is there a possibility? I just wanted to take you through this. Now, the whole framework of today's lecture would be, first thing is about the past, what happened in the past, since, where do we start in history? Again, locating and saying that this is the part where you should begin. Is it in 1947, is it 1917, is it before that? So you can go to any extent if you talk about the past, but so somewhere or the other we have to decide where we locate it and say that these are the things which had a cumulative effect, and we have reached this particular stage. So that is one aspect that I would like to deal. Then the next one is about the present. What is happening, ground zero, exactly, why is it happening, what kind of things can be done. That aspect we have to look into. Then later a few thoughts about future. When I say a few thoughts about future, we are not, we can't predict future. None of us have that kind of a skill or knowledge. And when we are engaged in as legal professionals, we are involved in what? Suggesting some kind of a law reform. But the framework that I chose is not legal, is not purely legal. That is why if you notice I mentioned the frameworks and the context. I didn't use it a singular term. There are several frameworks in which we can discuss this particular topic. It can be political in nature. It can be where we talk about the security concerns. So security concerns can be one framework. The third framework would be legal, purely legal. I haven't chosen the third, and obviously the part which maybe a regular legal professional might do it. Maybe I will have to juggle and look into all different frameworks and get back. Now, the other last, the topic in the terms of future, what lies ahead, and what impact Gaza had on Israel, what impact it had on Palestine, and the impact it had on the world order, where it might be the global north or the global south. What is the impact of this particular, the whole thing which is happening, unfolding before us? How is it really going to impact? Has it already impacted? The kind of impact it has on the international order. Not only that, even within nation states, we find that it is affecting nation states on a large scale. How is it affecting? Is it really affecting the US politics? Is it affecting UK politics and the way the kind of decisions that they are taking? So Gaza is not, it is a very tiny strip. That is, what is happening in Gaza is having a rippling effect throughout the world, and it's pulsating through the whole world, if I might use that particular term, because somewhere or the other it is some unconscionable things are happening which shouldn't have happened, are happening. So how do we accept those facts? How do we reckon with those facts? And how do we take forward our lives? Because we have to live with that reality. No? So these are the things that I thought of discussing. Since we have pressed for time, I'll just take you through certain things in the timeline. Now this is before going into the timeline, this is the map of the Middle East. If you notice, Gaza is here. This is Israel, and Gaza is a tiny strip over here. But now it is making us, all of us, sit up and look at things. Okay. What happened? Why did we come to this particular stage? If we speak about it, what we find is that there is a welcome, sir. When we speak about the issue relating to Palestine, I mentioned that it is a 108 years war which is going on. Now, though it is a 108 years war, and why did it actually go? What was the reasons behind it? What led to the outbreak of the conflicts, which is constantly disrupting both the Israeli society as well as the Palestinian society? If we look at it from close quarters, what Pankaj Mishra, I just brought all these books with me, maybe just to flaunt those books for various reasons. One reason is that I know that there are many students in this university who are voracious readers. I just wanted to show that I am also in league with you. That is one thing. Second thing is that one of my professors, Professor Subramaniam, had said that always carry a book with you and show it to the students and read the contents from within, from that particular thing. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that my senior, Ravindra Garu, who used to go to the court, that's the old generation of lawyers. It was very important for them to carry hard copies to the court hall and argue, citing from the hard copy. So that's one reason why I brought the books here. Now, Pankaj Mishra speaks about that. This is a very tricky issue. Here, the victim is a victimizer. We can't say that, like in all other colonial projects, that it is one is a weak party, or one is a villain and another is a hero. Here, when we look at the whole what happened in the past, what we find is that there is a lot of persecution. Jews were being persecuted throughout the world, especially in Europe. And we have to familiarize ourselves with a few terms. One of them is anti-Semitism. Another is obviously Judaism, which speaks about the religion. But we cannot confuse Judaism with anti-Semitism and Zionism. These are three terms I would like you to remember. They are three different things. One is religion, which speaks about religion, Judaism. Anti-Semitism is the persecution of Jews. Jews have been persecuted throughout the history, whether it is ancient history, medieval history, or you take the case of modern times, we find that they have been persecuted. And their persecution, mostly, largely, if you look at it, it happened in Europe. And when we speak about their presence in the Arab countries or the Arab world or the Arab, in that particular region, why is that they are going back and back again to that particular place, that is Palestine? Why do they choose Palestine? First thing is that they had to flee away from Palestine, especially from Jerusalem, when they were when Romans were during the Roman Empire, they had to leave. That is in 70 CE. During that particular period, what happened is that the Romans destroyed their temple, their religious shrine, which is known as the Temple Mount. This was the second time that it had been there, it was being destroyed. First, the Babylonians had destroyed the temple in Jerusalem. The second time that it was covered, the whole structure was brought down, was during the Roman Empire period. That was in 70 CE. And after that, the Jews were almost they were sent out of Jerusalem by the Roman Empire. And when this whole thing happened, they lost their homeland. But there is a significant presence of Arab Jews, Arab Christians and Arab Muslims in the Middle East. And they were spread all over. It's not only in Palestine but also all over the Arab Middle East we find the presence. Now, after the fleeing of the Jews from Jerusalem, what happened is that they spread all over the world, especially in Europe. And they were not welcome anywhere. Now, after nation states had been created, this is a very thriving mercantile community. You find that not only Arab Jews but also Arab Muslims are a mercantile community, which is a trading community moving from one place to another. In the morning family law class itself, I was talking about that we have this concept of marriage, the contract in Muslim law, just because they are it is a thriving mercantile community. They don't consider marriage as a sacrament just because it is a mercantile community. So what happened is that they were going on from one place to another, and it is a thriving mercantile community, very prosperous, also very creative, and you find it very prominent people like Einstein, Sigmund Freud, Karl Marx, and take the case of Noam Chomsky. They have in every field what we find is that Jews have thrived. So when they were being persecuted, why is this persecution happening? Various reasons. One of them they attributed to the fact that they link it up with the concern about they being contributing to the death of Jesus Christ. That is one concern. So who is persecuting them basically? Is it the Arab Muslims? Is it Palestinians who have done it? No. It is mostly they have been subject to persecution in the European countries. And when this is happening, in Spain, for instance, in Spain, they had to, they are known as the Sephardic Jews, they had to move there from Portugal. And from Portugal again there was a massacre. And from there they moved to the Ottoman Empire. So in Ottoman Empire they were accommodated for quite a long time, and Jews lived along with the Arab Muslims and the Arab Christians. They was living in peace and harmony, and relatively, this is not something which I am bringing. I have created this kind of a fiction. We find that Avi Shleim, who is an Israeli historian, he states that he is an Iraqi Jew. He himself says that Ilan Pape, who is also an Israeli Jew, he speaks of it. Not only Palestinian historians like Edward said, but all of them say that during the Ottoman Empire, all of them were living in peace and harmony. And there is a place called Salonika in the Ottoman Empire, where actually the Jews thought that we should have create our own sovereign state, and they worked towards it. So they needed this kind. There was an urge for homeland, which is a legitimate legitimate demand or legitimate desire. Everyone wants to have a home and a homeland. There is can you find fault with that? So they had that kind of a desire, that they had been forcefully evicted from their particular land, the promised land, and according to their religion, according to their Judaism, it was their God who was supposed to bring them back to the promised land, to their homeland. Now that is what the religion says. It only says that it should be voluntary. God will someday bring you back to the promised land. Now they didn't say that we have to go and take it forcibly, and that's where it stands. So as I was referring to Salonika issue, no? So but somehow in the League of Nations, when we were trying to put it in the League of Nations, it didn't work. They couldn't work towards it. The thing somehow it didn't materialize. Then after this whole thing happened, what we find is that persecution was happening. People were moving from one part of the world to another. But one thing what we find is that in Asia and in India, for that matter, particularly in India, Jews were never persecuted. They were never persecuted, neither in India or in Africa. Only mostly what we find is that the persecution happened in Europe, and that's it. Then coming to later periods, when we speak about the colonial era, once the colonial era started and all the colonial states started going and colonizing the countries, Britain and France happened to have colonized most of the Middle East. And League of Nations also, what it did is that it created those were treated as mandated areas, and Palestine fell in within the purview of Britain. So UK got the Palestine and through the mandate. So when they were administering that particular that region, Palestine, then also there were it was the culturally, when you speak about it, there is a kind of myth that these people are very backward, they are savages. That is the impression that the Western world has about the Arab people, sadly, unfortunately. And when we speak about it, what about the language, Persian language, or when you speak about Arabic language, is there no literature there? Isn't there any culture, or don't they have a history or a civilization? All that is something which the Western world was not able to maybe comprehend or accept that particular fact. So there is a very huge gap between the Western world and the Arab region. So when this was happening during that particular period, 1882. In 1882, during that particular period, there was one Jew scholar known by the name Theodor Herzl. This Theodor Herzl, he came up with the idea that we should have a homeland of our own. Jews should have a homeland of their own, because we are being persecuted throughout the world, so we should have a homeland of our own. And he created a kind of an ideology. He conceptualized it and said we should have a Jewish state, and we should have a sovereign Jewish state. And when they were looking at this is called Zionism. Anti-Semitism is about persecution of Jews, but Zionism is something which speaks about the supremacy of the Jewish community. So there is an element of supremacy. That is one aspect, and there are various different forms and kinds of Zionism also. For instance, if you talk about religious Zionism, religious Zionism speaks of going back to the homeland, going back to the Holy Land. That is one way of looking at it. Political Zionism is more forward, or pragmatic Zionism. There is another Zionism which speaks about that we should have a place of our own. We shouldn't be hounded like this and hunted and hounded like this, being killed by so many people. So let us not do it, let us go ahead and have a particular place. So Britain, since it was having many colonies, they entertained an idea that let us think about creating a Jewish state in Uganda. So initially it was not Israel, Palestine was not the location. Britain had the idea that let us start it in Uganda and let us done there. Why was Britain so keen about sending them there? It was not, what is this project? What was the Britain, why was Britain thinking in those terms? If you look at it, there is among in Britain, there were quite elite Jewish community was also there. They also didn't want, strangely and sadly, they didn't want the Ashkenazi Jews who come from the East European parts to settle down in UK, because many people were coming because of that persecution. And the British government, it was against it. And what they did is that they started trying to say that you're not welcome. We know now the whole thing is what is happening even now in various countries. People are being deported, illegal immigrants are being deported. That is how those who were coming for as refugees, they were not welcome in England, and there were various instances where they were sent back. So, but at the same time, they had this. There is another what kind of Zionism, and that is Christian Zionism. What is this Christian Zionism? These are Christians, but they are Zionists. How come that they are Christians and they speak about having another Jewish state? Then again, if you look at the religious aspect, in Christianity, there is one aspect where they say that if the Jews get their home back, then actually Jesus will, it will lead to the resurrection of Jesus. So someday, I am subject to correction. This is not my area, if you talk about it. I also am learning. And again, it's a very sensitive issues that we are dealing with. Religion, we can't talk so. In this particular aspect, as I had said, they had this thing, if these people get their homeland, we are going to get back our God will be resurrected. So they had this idea. So actually what happens is that we find that in America, the way Americans are reacting now, the reason why they are reacting, one of the reasons, I don't say there aren't other reasons, one of the reasons why they are responding in this manner, the political establishment or the people of US are responding in this manner, or in UK, the kind of responses we are getting is that one of them is that the evangelist church, a few evangelist church, they strongly believe it, and that's why they support the Jewish cause, and they're going to any extent in supporting Israel. Because they believe that that state should be there, and if that is going to happen, we will be able to deal with our own issues related to with our own religion. So when this whole thing was happening, the other issue which Britain really was concerned is that from East Europe, when they were coming, the people, if you look at their social profile, most of them were economically very poor. So they were not welcome. They were not coming with any skills, and on top of it, they felt that it was economic burden on their economy. So they came up with this whole idea that let us do one thing, and again we can't simply straitjacket every human emotion. Maybe those administrators who were sitting there in Britain also might have had kind of some people might have thought that must have had empathy also towards the Jewish population, thinking, these people really deserve a homeland, what is wrong in it? So that is one reason why they started in search of, said, let us go give them a homeland. Now when you speak about giving a homeland, they could have given the homeland in some part of Europe, right? They could have given them one province in maybe Britain. And since Holocaust was carried out mostly by Germany, they could have given some province of Germany and said that you rehabilitate them. You kill so many, more than 1/3 of the population, of the Jewish population, you kill them. And then you say that you go and get yourself rehabilitated in Palestine. How fair is it? Again, if you look at it from that perspective, but one thing we have to understand is that there are multiple, Ilan Pape speaks of this thing saying that we can't straight judge it why Britain took up this and said that you have to have go and have a Israel in Palestine. So anyway, whatever the reasons might be, in 1917, when we speak about 1970, what crosses our mind? The Russian Revolution. So each one of us remember dates depending on our area of interest. One person might be thinking about 1917 as the Russian Revolution and think about the good things which happened and the bad things which happened in the Soviet Union. That can be one thing. The second thing is that for Edward said, when once one of the scholars, Tariq Ali, asked Edward said, what does it strike you? How do you look at 1917? 1917 for him was the first war of declaration of war for Edward said, because on that day the Balfour Declaration was announced. Now what is this Balfour Declaration? Balfour was the foreign secretary. Everything started with the Balfour Declaration. That's why I'm mentioning it. In 1970, this is the Balfour Declaration. Just look at it. This is a foreign secretary writing a letter to Rothschild, a Jewish prosperous Jewish businessman, who was actually funding the whole project, Israel project initially. Even before 1917, what happened is that after Theodor Herzl had given this whole call for Zionism, people were going and settling down in in Palestine. They were buying land, and they had started this whole the kibbutz that we call now. Where one of the reasons what they are doing is that in the villages they are going and having kibbutz, which is a kind of an experimental way community kind of a farming which is happening, which is very renowned kind of a thing. In agricultural practices, everyone goes to Israel to watch what is happening in the kibbutz. So they started doing this whole exercise since 1882. So when they were doing it, when we look at this whole thing, from 1882, they started going and settling down in Israel, in the present Israel or Palestine. But even then, there were 7 lakh Palestinians by then. What Theodor Herzl had promised is that this is going to be a land without people and a people without land. So that was a call given by Herzl, saying that there are no people there. We are going to go and settle there. So that was the impression he gave. Herzl is going to be a people without. We are the people without the land. Jewish people without the land. We need the land, and it is going to be a land without people where we are going to go. So they are not even willing to acknowledge the fact. Were not willing to acknowledge the fact that there is something called that Palestine has people there. There are people living, and it is not only Arab Muslims who were living. There were Arab Jews. There were Arab Christians also. Edward said, for that matter, is an Arab Christian. The most prominent Palestinian, and a voice which is even now it keeps on resonating in the American universities. Even now it resonates, and people remember him quite a lot for the kind of work he has done for the Palestinian cause. So when this was happening, as I had said, from 1882 they started migrating and purchasing land. Where will they get that money from? Some people were very poor. East European Jews were very poor. So people like Rothschild were funding. So they raised funds on a large scale to buy land in Israel. So even before Balfour declaration happened, European Jews they started going and settling down, and even after so many people went, the land is not the very fertile land. It is a desert land. So people used to go there, stay there for a while and leave. So if you need a nation, you need territory, you need people. Population hona hai na. Without population, how can you build a nation? So they had to simply see that people would come there and settle down. That was one major challenge which the Zionists faced, that people have to find it interesting. Going there and worshipping God. You won't go to Tirupati, you go there to stay there. You worship God and come back. You won't go to Makkah, Medina and stay there. You go there and worship. Now this is something where you want to stay. If you want to stay, that conducive environment was not there, so people were going and finding wherever they were coming from quite a better place to stay, go back. So that you find that a lot of influx was happening till 1917 and also later. In 1917, this is a kind of a declaration which Foreign Secretary of UK made. But this did not stop there. What they did is that in in 1922, the League of Nations came up with the mandate for Palestine. And in that mandate, whatever Balfour Declaration, what was written in Balfour Declaration, where I'll read out that part in Balfour Declaration if you later. What they say is that they admit the fact that there are people which they constantly had been denied. But they didn't want to negotiate with that people. They didn't want to tell them that, you acknowledge that there are people and you have to even say that, ask them, talk them, are you willing to accept them as your neighbors or as a part of your community? They simply thought that, we can manage them, these are savages and we can handle it and they should be treated as savages. Now coming to this part, I would like to bring in the concept of settler colonialism. What is this settler colonialism about? We spoke about Zionism, anti-Semitism and Judaism. Now coming to anti-Semitism, settler colonialism, it is one kind of a colonialism where the colonizer wants to settle. It's not as if you go and loot and plunder and come back to your own country. You want to settle there. There are several examples of settler colonialism. What are they? US is one good example of settler colonialism, where they had completely eliminated, completely destroyed the indigenous, completely displaced them, and they occupied that land. And they had a metropolis in London. You take the case of Algeria. There also they went there and it was a settler colonialism. South Africa is the best example of settler colonialism, where people went there, the British went there widely to stay there. They didn't want to go back to their metropolis. They were sending whatever, there was a kind of an equation which they had with their metropolis. Later the US declared independence, that is another story. But in South Africa is another very good example. There is Britain, France or Spain or other, they were not directly, they were doing it through the Israelis or through the Jews. So they were the Jewish community who were going there and settling down. They became handlers of colonialists. So if you look at it, it is not completely the Jewish project or an Israeli project. It is an extension of British colonialism. It is initially till 1967, it was only the extension of the British colonialism. Then what happened, as I had said, in 1922 when they went ahead with this, the League of Nations mandate, there again they acknowledged the fact that Palestinians are there, but they only talk about what will happen, how will the Arabs react, the Arab world, how will it react, the other Arab countries, how are they going to react. I showed you the map earlier. If you look at the map, it is on one side you have Jordan, and on another side you have on north you have Lebanon and Syria, and towards the east you have Jordan, and towards the south you have Egypt, and again the Mediterranean Sea on the west. This is the geographical location. It is bounded by these different countries. On one side, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. So these are the neighboring countries of Palestine. And in this, when they started talking about creating an Israeli state, How much of territory should Israel be given? There was a percentage. They started calculating. They said first 3%, then 13%, and the rest will be with Palestinians. This kind of an exercise happened even during the League of Nations time. And mandate, as I said, was given to the Britain. And by that time, slowly when we were going into the Second World War phase, Britain was facing already was a lot of backlash was there. Other colonies were seeking for independence, and they had to again deal with Germany and other countries. So when by the time we got into the Second World War, around 1935, this whole Holocaust and Exodus started. Now, when such a major calamity is happening, initially all the Allied forces which were there, and again this is something which is chronicled, I am not putting up anything. So when we speak about this whole thing, what they said is that they tried to, US was receptive. They accepted a few refugees who went there, who were fleeing from persecution, some of the Jews from German persecution, they accounted, but mostly when you speak about the Holocaust, they were not welcome, they were not willing to provide them any kind of a rehabilitation. So they just almost pushed them back into the concentration camps. So that's a sad thing which happened. So ultimately, now we know how many number of people died in the Holocaust, and 1933 or 35, when the Holocaust was happening, then this whole Zionist project of people going and joining and going back and settling down in Israel started on a large scale. So for the first time, what they found is that the number of people who opted for and started going to settling down in Palestine started with on a large scale started with Holocaust. And at the same time, what happened is that even in the Arabian countries, there was some persecution which happened, and obviously the kind of things which were happening throughout the world. Some people from even in from Iraq, Iran, other parts of the parts also they also joined, and especially when we speak about post 1947, lot of people were pushed into Israel. And there was a design, and it happened apart from what the Iraqi government or Iraqi people expecting. This is again Avi Shlaim, who is an Israeli historian, he mentions it, that they were very happy. If he thinks about a homeland, it is Iraq. But people started becoming hostile, and once they started becoming hostile because of various reasons, because they felt that by Balfour Declaration had its own impact on the Arab world. So they had their own sympathies they had towards the Palestinians. So what the Iraqi people started doing is that they became hostile for them, so they preferred going to Israel. More than that, 5 bomb explosions happened in Iraq, and these were planned by the Mossad. By then Mossad was there. Mossad is one of the what do you call extrajudicial organization which is run in Israel. And this came later, it was quite widely documented, and after the classified documents were released, they could figure out that it is the Mossad who were actually trying to see that, so that the Jews can go back to Israel. So that kind of an exercise happened, that is also one thing. I'll take a break now. Professor Ranveer Singh will address us, then we can continue with the discussion later. Calamity that we also, a traumatic condition that we had to go through, and that is the partition between Pakistan and India. If you see that there is a pattern when we speak about the colonizers, a similar kind of a problem they created even in Palestine. In 1947, what they did is that the UN followed the same according to what was laid down in League of Nations mandate. They again came up with the UN General Assembly. It passed a resolution 181 of 1947, which reinforced what was mentioned in Balfour Declaration and in the League of Nations Madrid. So now it became official, a legitimate thing, because not only League of Nations but also UN also said that there should be Israel. So when they came up with this whole idea of Israel, they didn't say that it is a state, nation state as in Israel. They said that it is a nation homeland, Jewish homeland, Jewish nation, national homeland. Now why did they hesitate to call it a nation state? That is again they just wanted to beat around the bush, but actually the intention was to create the state of Israel. And what we talk about is that this is whole debate going on that acha, this is a minor sector, a very small country. Israel is in the midst of various different Arab countries. So there is always a threat, that it perceived threat that it might be attacked by other Arabian countries. When we look into the history, since the times when Egypt, if we talk about Egypt and Jordan and Syria and Lebanon, except Lebanon, what we find is that other countries, neighboring countries have been hostile towards, they have not been so accommodated towards Palestine. And they have been, in a way, especially Jordan has been constantly being supportive of Israel. When you talk about the 1947, after 1947 declaration, Palestinians opposed it on a large scale, and they came on the streets. But and again, back then, Arab countries also they took up this particular cause, and they had a big battle happened between Arab countries and Israel, but they were defeated, and they were defeated horribly. So after that, what they learned their lessons, and there were other issues which they had with their own colonizers. So with the kind of equation they had with Britain, the kind of equation they had subsequently with US, or the kind of what alliances that they created, that led to what isolation of Palestinians. And when we speak about Palestine, Palestine was not given a state status. They didn't give a Palestine the status of a state. What they did is that they divided Palestine into parts, and Gaza Strip, West Bank, and part of Jerusalem, East Jerusalem went they gave it to, it remained Palestine. The remaining part, what they had done is, it's not even contiguous. If you look at Gaza Strip and the West Bank and Jerusalem, there is no continuity. And in between you have Israel, the territory of Israel. So as a landmass also they are not united. And that also helps in keeping them, the security, in terms of security, Israel has an advantage. So this can continue, this partition took place in 1947, and Gaza Strip was under the control of Egypt. West Bank went into the control of Jordan, and that is how they divided. And Jerusalem, again, initially they said it will be under the International Trusteeship Council, which was created in the beginning, but somehow that did not materialize, and Jordan was taking care of that particular region. And in this went on for a while, and when in a span of 20 years, Israel got very, very militarized, and by 1967, this 1948, when what happened is that after they got the statehood, Israel was created, they immediately pushed out and they necked out all the Palestinians, and most of them had to seek refuge in Lebanon, Jordan, and parts of Egypt. So refugee camps they had to stay. Now, even now, a few of them are living in refugee camps. Since how many years? From 1947 till now, there are refugee camps, and one of the refugee camps is in Gaza, in Jabalia, which is in Gaza Strip. It's still functioning. So people who were in the Israel part, they were pushed out of it, and mercilessly almost more than 6 lakh people were completely, 6 lakhs people were completely displaced. I am not very good with numbers, they are in the PPT, maybe at the end I will scroll. So that was one thing. Then in 1967, what happened is that was a period when Vietnam War was going on throughout the world, and there was a lot of resistance against Vietnam War. And back in 1967, what the Israelis did is that they came up with a 6-day war, and they declared a war against all the Arab countries, and they pushed them out of West Bank, Gaza Strip, and Jerusalem, and they occupied. Now that is when we look at the map. If you look at this map, the first map was before 1947. All that green part is Palestine. Okay. Now after 1947, what is the map of Israel? Look at the green part. Gaza Strip on the east, on the west, and the West Bank on the east, and Jerusalem. That is the territory belonging to Israel. Then in 1960, post 1967, what happens? If you look at 2010, the Israel territory, West Bank has been completely occupied by settlers. Who are these settlers? They are illegal settlers belonging to Israel. So even though West Bank happens to be in terms of international borders which were created in 1947, belong to Palestine, they have been occupied by Israeli settlers, and that is an ongoing process. Even recently, we find Smotrich, he came up with a plan saying that we are going to create a kind of housing plan through which there will be completely Jerusalem will be cut out. There won't be any link between Jerusalem and West Bank, and that way try to even create hurdles for it creating a Palestine state, because now people are demanding. Even UK came up, and France came up, Spain came up, and many other countries are saying that we want to vote for in the General Council Assembly in September for the state of Palestine. When they started raising this issue, they are coming up and very belligerently taking a stand that we want to go ahead and see that state of Palestine will not be created. In 1967, post that, though they won that victory, and they could simply see that the Arab countries are pushed out of West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Later, there was a lot of people started talking about Palestine liberation, and the PLO was formed. Palestinian Liberation Organization was formed, which is Yasser Arafat is the leader of that particular organization. And not only PLO, we have a Fatah, an organization called Fatah, a movement, National Liberation Movement started in Palestine. And there was many writers and cultural activists and people who were concerned about Palestine. They started talking about it. One thing that we understand is that in Beirut, it happened to be one place where it is not only a place where people talk only about Palestine liberation, but it was a place where a cultural center for Arab countries, and it's a kind of a place where it is known for what politics which are progressive. Politics started emerging, and they found a place in Beirut in the 1980s. So that became a major concern for Israel. It found a threat in it. And the other thing is that there were certain kind of people started conflict started taking place, and Palestinian militant organizations started attacking civilians, Israeli civilians in the villages and other parts in the kibbutz they were going, and attacking them because they can't directly attack the soldiers, military. So this led to a lot of within the Israeli society. They didn't like this idea that they found it as a security threat. That is one thing, and the second thing is that they didn't want Palestine to evolve into a state. And they found that if we agree Palestinian existence, it is going to be an existential threat to us. So it is, if we want to survive as a state, these people have to somehow or the other, they have to, I don't know what they expect even now. From 1917 till 2025, they just simply want them to vanish into thin air. That is their concern. Just vanish. Where are they going to vanish? Where is concern? You just have to
Either you can go for ethnic cleansing. That is what is happening now. That happened for the past 1 or 8 years. That has been continuing. So it is not something which started in October. I want to emphasize that fact that Nakba did not stop in 1948. Nakba, which is a catastrophe, they say that Palestinians were completely routed, they were displaced, and they were thrown out of all parts of Palestine. That is something which is a continuous process, which is happening even till date. Now, in 1982, what Israel did is that it went and attacked Lebanon. And that prolonged war which took place in Lebanon, they won that actually. They won that war, and Lebanon was subjugated. But why did they go there? Just to attack the Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon and the support base of the Palestinians. They tried to attack them. And at that particular time, PLO was compelled to give up arms and to surrender. So on that, they came to a terms. The terms of understanding were that PLO has to leave. So they left Lebanon, and on that was the basis for the armistice. And with that agreement, so later the PLO went and has established its headquarters in Tunisia. And that is where they stayed till they came back later after the Oslo Accord they had an Oslo Accord in 1997. Till then, PLO's headquarters was in Tunisia. Now, so that's what happened with the PLO and its organization. Now coming to after 1982, after Beirut, the war, they won the war. Now the militancy started erupting in Palestine. Now earlier it was coming from other places. People were attacking Israel from other places. Now the dissent and the militancy started erupting within the Palestinian territory. So this was a new phenomena that we come across. And now this happened in 1987, post Lebanon war. They started it became very, very proactive. One thing that we have to understand is that there is a law, they don't have leadership. There is a major problem with Palestine is that they don't have a leadership which could actually guide them. Yasser Arafat happened to be a very good leader in the beginning, but maybe because the lack of the kind of exposure that the Israeli lobby had all over the world. After the British had left, what happened is that in 1948 itself, they understood after the Pearl Harbor attack and after the Second World War that there is a turn of tide, and now actually the superpower is not UK but US. What they did is that the Israeli lobby started establishing links with the American establishment, not only the political establishment but the entire economy. In terms of economic, the running of the economy, Israeli lobby is very, 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 very strong in place, and it has its. It really can make they fund the Democrats, they fund the Republicans. And when you speak about the number of how much of amount of funding they really indulge in, the former president of Democratic president, who was it before Trump? But he happens to he received the largest amount of funds from IPAC, from the Israeli lobby. So that much. So when you have your funding age, you can't go against your funding agency, no. The very American president is completely, he feels obligated that I have to follow what these people are saying. And this is not, everything is on record. So you can understand why these people are trying to support. One thing, evangelism, which Christian Zionism. Second one, settler state, being a settler colonial state. Being a settler colonial state, you also have done the same kind of crimes earlier with another set of people. The indigenous community in Australia, in US, in New Zealand, in all parts of the world, you have done the same thing to the indigenous community. Now this is what people say, the scholars say is that this is a project, colonial settler project was a 19th century project, and it is a delayed project which happened in Israel.
So by then people had abandoned, they had moved on. Israel was caught up in this post-colonial, what you call, project, a 19th century project was they had to take up this delayed project. That is one reason why we find that doesn't have any, people can't buy this argument, especially post Second World War when we have a international order which talks about what? It talks about democracy, it talks about peace, it talks about harmony, it talks about human rights. So in this present day narrative, is it possible to have a colonial secular state? It was possible in the 19th century because that was they didn't have this experience back then. We didn't have a Second World War, we didn't have Holocaust, we didn't have the concept of Great Depression, which led to the welfare economy, welfare state concept. Now we have all these different forms of democracy which are in existence, and we didn't have this concept of free speech as well established as we have now. So in this present day context, is it possible to have a Jewish state? Is it possible to have a colonial, secular colonial state? So these are internal contradictions which we have to understand. So even if within Israel, what do people think about how do they respond to what is happening? Coming to this particular part, obviously Palestine will obviously want to have do away with this whole thing. So what is the solution for how do we go ahead with this thing? So initially what happened is that Yasser Arafat in the 1980s, he came up with a plan, and that was a plan which people, serious Palestinian thinkers and people who are working for its cause, they said that, see, they have their own compulsions, we have our own compulsions. They are a persecuted lot, the Israelis. They are what the Jewish people are persecuted. So let us do one thing, let us go for a common state. A common state where everyone is equal. This is a draft which was prepared and mooted and accepted by PLO. And Mohammed Darwish, he came up with a declaration of national liberation of Palestine, and that also reflects that we should have a one state in which everyone will be equal. But it is a Zionist state, and this Zionist state, what does it think of? That you talk about supremacy of Jews. When you say that Jews should be supreme, then what about the Palestinians? You just always want to keep them as secondary citizens, and if you keep them as secondary citizens, it is not only about the apartheid. Now that is what this apartheid state means. That is what South Africa faced. And when you want to have that kind of a system, will it actually sustain? Is it possible to sustain such a particular such kind of a state? It is humanly impossible, because people will aspire for liberation, they will aspire for equality. It is in their integral part of our DNA itself. We seek for liberation, we seek for freedom, we seek for equality. So when it is in the DNA of the human beings, how can you expect that the Palestinians should agree? So it is intrinsically, there is there is an internal contradiction between, they are caught up in this whole mess. So there is another solution which they came up with, and that is a two-state solution. Now if you look at this map, is two-state solution possible? Already Palestinian territory has become, look at it, dots, almost simply vanished, and they are not in, and it is a military state. Highly militarized state, Israel. And being a militarized state, you cannot even expect them to give it back to them. Or till now, what has been happening is that these people are, now let us come to Hamas. I'll just briefly talk about it and wind up. Now coming to Hamas, there are several other militant organizations. This was an organization which came into existence in 1987. And this is an organization which is in a way, it was a resentment against PLO which led to the creation of Hamas, and it was actively being promoted by US. Initially Hamas Foundation, if you look at it, it was US which promoted it. And when they promoted it, and later when Hamas turned against them, now they want to subjugate it. Now coming to what the kind of hostility which prevails. In 1987, there was one
mass protest which happened, which is called the first Intifada. Now the first Intifada happens to be a peaceful protest, no violence, nothing. Though that happens to be the year when Hamas was founded, but that was a more peaceful, non-violent struggle. And that first Intifada, when it happened, people were on the streets, they were simply why did they go for the first Intifada? 4 Palestinians the military jeep, it overran 4 Palestinians and they killed 4 Palestinians. And it was these people were not even protesting against them. That led to the first Intifada. Spontaneously, sporadically, there was an outbreak. So when this happened, this non-violent movement was also very violently suppressed. That is one thing. Then the other thing that they do is that they try to burn out people through negotiation. Talks, talks, talks. That is what is happening now. General Assembly, you sit in the General Assembly, go there, sit, resolution, some abstain, it isn't passed. Then another round of talks. Talks in US, talks in UK, talks in then in US, again US. So this is a kind of a pattern that we find that they are, one thing, they are highly militarized, they keep on, they make it very openly say that if you are going to kill 1, you are going to kill 50. That's a kind of we have come to a stage. I mean, this is something which is very difficult for us to comprehend. We have been raised on the being taught the principles of rule of law. We are teaching the principles of rule of law, the faculty. We talk about constitutional values, constitutional morality. But when people are talking in these terms, how are we supposed to negotiate with them? How are we supposed to talk with them? It's we are living in a world where completely different kind of a narrative is being built. So how are they supposed to, how are we as individuals supposed to respond to this particular situation? And what is it ultimately, is there a solution to these? If you search for the solutions, they are, in concluding this particular session, I would say that whose solution are we seeking for? Is it Israel? Does Israel have any kind of solution in its mind? Is it only mindless violence that they are thinking of? You go and kill so many people. And in turn, they will be attacking. October 7th is again, for some it is an act of terror, for some it is a slave revolution. Norman Finkelstein, who is happening in Israel and what is happening in Palestine is something else. But what is happening in UN? Why is UN failing? That should be our concern. And how are we supposed to look at it? So if you talk about legal solution, or immediate solution which people are talking about, people like Noemi Klein and others are talking, is that let us go for Article 370, Resolution 377A of 1956. What is this resolution? During the Suez Canal crisis, if you recollect, I know it's very vague, in that particular crisis, Britain had a problem with Egypt. And when they were about oil and sharing of oil, and they had a problem, and there was a conflict. And in this conflict, what UK did is that, UK and France did is that, what they did is that they took the help of Israel to counter the Egyptian forces and to capture Suez Canal and have a say in that. They did it, what Israel did is that it did not inform US when they took this particular initiative. So US and Soviet Union were not informed about this whole exercise, this armed conflict which was happening, and Egypt happened to be have the support of US and USSR back then. Okay, so they were very angry that this small tiny country goes against us, they don't even tell us and do this kind of a major thing. So they came up with the resolution, passed the US resolution, 377A of in the General Assembly. Say, what is this resolution? Since there is a there is an impasse in the United Nations Security Council, you cannot take any kind of a measure. The UN forces can't go into a place unless and until UN security forces it passes a resolution, and constantly it is being vetoed by US or some other authorities. So 377A is a General Assembly resolution which says that even if there is an impasse in Security Council, if things are go in such a bad shape, UN General Assembly can take a decision and send forces. So when they could do that in 1956, why can't we do it now? So people are raising this issue. I don't know, but the chances are very bleak. We know what happened to ICJ's orders, we know what happened to ICC's orders. Will they really go ahead? Who is talking about it? It is global south countries like South Africa and other Namibia, and all these countries are talking about it. All the superpowers all the people who are members, permanent members are against it. So the possibilities of exploring that particular resolution are very deep. Let us see how it works out. Maybe an effort is happening. If it really works, let us see. Miracles do happen in life. Let us hope it happens. Then political solution is when you speak about the political solution, is the two-state solution possible? Look at the map. Is it possible? I don't think it is. So what is the other option? Ethnic cleansing is the option, which is ongoing option, which Israel thinks is viable. They want to wipe out the entire population. That is the Zionist agenda. That is one option. Second option is apartheid, where they go for a ceasefire and say, you live as secondary citizens, you live as slaves, you live as in the open prison. We will determine whether you deserve land, water or anything, whatever we want, basic amenities, we will determine. That is second option. You go for a state where it's not a Jewish state, but everyone is equal. These are three options, political options, which the people speak of. And whether it is possible or not, now we have to see, wait and watch. That's one. When it comes to international order, what we find is that Gaza has completely changed this. The ideas that we believed in post-Second World War international order, is it still working? Those doubts are lingering now, and if ICJ's orders are not being followed properly, if ICC orders are not followed properly, is this a really efficient way of dealing things? Very, very careful that, because it is not only going to be the Israel, this is a playbook. This model is going to be followed in every other part of the world. And I think we have to be careful and cautious about it.